Hey, this is Rick Kasalich, injury specialist from exercisesforinjuries.com. In today's video, I wanted to go through back pain workout at home, the Bodyweight edition. I'll get Alex to go through the first exercise, then I'll explain it in greater detail, and then I'll go through the other exercises. There we go. That ends up being the first one, a back arch. So you're standing, feet end up being a little bit further than hip width apart. You're bringing the hands like on your hips, low back, hip area, pelvis area. Then you're going to arch back, focusing on that movement happening in that low back, and then coming back to the start. So with this one ends up being a mobility exercise. So what we're trying to do is loosen up those lower back joints, because a lot of times they end up having poor movement, or they end up being stuck and stiff, and we need to loosen them up in order to help reduce back pain. When it comes to sets, reps, time, and intensity, sets end up being 1, repetitions go through 5, time ends up being smooth controlled movement with a good stop at the end, about 1 second, and the intensity ends up being light, because we're looking more at a mobility exercise, improving the movement in that low back area. Now, if you end up having a lot of back pain, just go to the point that you might end up having some discomfort, but we're not looking for screaming pain. So you're going to the point where if you have some discomfort to that point, and then coming back to the start, and then with time, you'll be able to move more and more when it comes to the arching of the back. Now, when it comes to the back pain workout, we've started off with that mobility exercise. Then we're going to move into the second exercise, and this ends up being a deadlift movement. So feet end up being about hip width apart. You're soft in the knees. You can see Alex. Then you're going to tighten up the abdominal area, bend through the hip. You can see that she's sliding her hands down her thighs and down her shins. You're ideally coming to a point of straight, your upper body being straight, and then you're going to straighten back up. Good. And then back down again. Looking at the feet, hip width apart, knees soft, movement at the hip, tighten up that core, upper body is in a good straight line. And then you're coming to straight, and then that head is in line with the rest of the body. Perfect. Now you might not be able to go through the full movement that Alex is able to go through. So what you want to do is go to the level that you can. So we'll go maybe, even if it's to that point, good Alex, and then coming back up. With this ends up being a re-education exercise, but also ends up being a core exercise. So we're trying to educate your body to utilize the hips when it comes to movement, as opposed to the low back. Also, we're working on the core, the abdominal area, tightening up and activating when you end up having forward trunk movement. Perfect. So there we go. And for some people, depending on how much flexibility you have, you might end up feeling a stretch in the hamstrings and the glutes, and that's perfectly normal. Now when it comes to, let's go through the sets, reps, time, and intensity. Sets end up being 1, repetitions go through 5. Time ends up being a smooth controlled movement with a good stop at the bottom position, so about 1 second. The intensity ends up being light. Now what you're looking at is, usually with back pain, you're most comfortable just standing or lying down on your back or sitting. So usually moving from a position of less spinal stress. Now when we move that upper body at an angle, that can end up increasing the spinal stress. So you just want to go to a point where you're just having some discomfort, but not screaming pain. You might not be able to get to the 90 position like Alex was able to, but you might be able to get to 10 degrees or 20 degrees or even like 30 degrees. And that's a good point to start, and then you work on increasing that. Now we've ended up going through 2 of the exercises. The third one ends up being the bridging exercise. So you move down to the floor, you're going to lie down, hands are going to be to the side, so your hands to the side, you're relaxed in the upper body, you're going to tighten up the abdominal area, the feet are about hip width apart, you're going to push through the feet, you're going to lift up the hips, and you're ideally coming to a point where the knee, hips, and shoulders are in a straight line, and then you're going to come back down. So with this one, this ends up being an excellent core exercise. So we're working hamstrings, we're working glutes, we're working the abdominal area, all the muscles around that lower back, which ends up being important. When looking at the sets, reps, time, and intensity, with this one, sets end up being 1, repetitions end up being 5, intensity ends up being light, but you want to feel those muscles in the hamstrings, glute, and the core working. When it comes to the speed that you're doing the exercise, it ends up being a smooth, controlled movement with a good stop at the top position, so about a second, and then back down. So that ends up being the third one. Now moving to the fourth one, it ends up being the open and close exercise. So you can see Alex has moved onto her side, knees bent, hips bent, the legs end up being stacked, and with the legs being in this position, it kind of anchors the lower body. Her upper body, her arms are straight and hands are together, and she's resting her head. If it's uncomfortable for her head, she can place something underneath it in order to keep that spine in good alignment. Now, with the hands together, she's going to open up, bring the arm back, falling with the head, ideally trying to rest that hand, and then going from an open position down to a closed position, and then repeating the movement. Good. So with this one, what we're doing is, with the legs stacked, we've kind of anchored the lower body, opening and closing with the hands. We end up targeting that mid-back area, which ends up being tight. People end up having poor movement. So it ends up being a good mobility exercise, improving the movement in the mid-back, but also there is some carryover to that lower back. Now Alex is able to go through the full movement. If you're not able to go through the full movement, just go right back to the start. Good. Go from here to wherever you can, where you just have some discomfort. Like you might be able to just go to this point and then return back, and that's fine. Once again, like with the other ones, you can go progressive in nature, try to go a little bit further each time that you end up going through this back pain workout at home. Now looking at the sets, reps, time, and intensity, sets end up being 1, repetitions end up being 5 on each side, time ends up being smooth, controlled movement with a good stop at the end position, so about a second, and the intensity ends up being light. We're looking at a mobility movement, so improving the movement in the mid-back, but also in that lower back. Now moving from this open and close exercise, we're going to move over to the 3-way plank movement. So Alex is going to move into a plank position, stacking her hands. She's going to prop herself up. So ankle, knees, hips, shoulders are in a good straight line with the head. So she's in a front plank position. She's going to stay there for a couple seconds. Then she's going to move to one side of the side plank position. Hold it there for a second or two. Back to the front plank position, 1, 2, and then moving to the other side plank position, 1, 2, and then back to the start. Good. So it ends up. That ends up being the 3-way plank movement. And with this, what we're really ending up doing is challenging that core, challenging that abdominal area in all 3 planes of movement: forward direction, side direction, and side direction. Also, we're challenging the hips, so we're improving the stability of the hips, so working the muscles around the hip. Looking at the sets, reps, time, and intensity, we're looking at 1 set. Repetitions, I would end up doing like 6 repetitions total, so you're in each of the positions a couple times. The time smooth controlled movement with a good stop at each of the positions, about 2 seconds, and the intensity you should end up feeling in your abdominal area and in your hip area. Perfect. Now, just to make one comment and to give Alex a little bit of a break, you might not be able to do the 3-way plank movement, so start off with just the front plank position. And you can do that. When that ends up getting easy and you're able to master it, then you can end up adding the side plank positions. And it's perfectly normal for one side, plank side, to be more challenging than the other side. It's totally normal. Now moving from that, the core exercise, strengthening the back exercise, we're going to go to the 90-90 hip flexor stretch. So you're kneeling and then bringing the foot forward. So we're looking at the front leg, ankle, knee, hip at 90, the back leg, ankle, knee, and hip at 90. This front of the foot is flat, And then what you're going to do is tighten up the abdominal area and bring the hips forward. Yeah, bring the hips forward, good. By like tightening the glutes and the hamstrings. And what we're working on is stretching out that front of that hip area, good. So targeting that hip flexor area, and a lot of times that hip flexor area ends up tightening up and increasing that back pain. So we want to address it. So this is a flexibility stretching exercise that targets a common muscle in the back that ends up being tight, that affects back pain. So we want to target it, and that's what we do with this 90-90 hip flexor stretch. When it comes to sets, reps, time, and intensity, the sets end up being 1 repetition. You're going to go 2 on each side, so alternating back and forth. Time, you're holding that end position for about 20 seconds, and the intensity, you're looking for a light stretch in that hip area, might even carry on into the thigh area. So that ends up being a flexibility stretching exercise. Now we're going to move to the last one, the Supermans. So you're going to move onto the floor, you're going to straighten out so you are like Superman, and then what you're going to do is lift one arm and then lift the opposite leg, good. And just alternating back and forth. So with this one, we're targeting hamstrings and glutes on one side, and on the opposite side, shoulder and mid-back area. And just like Alex is doing, you're just alternating back and forth. It's not a huge movement that ends up happening, but you're really targeting those hamstring, glutes, muscles around the shoulder blade, mid-back area. Looking at the sets, reps, time, and intensity, sets end up being 1. Repetitions ideally would be 5 on each side, so a total of 10 movements. Time ends up being smooth, controlled movement with a good stop, but a second at the top position. Intensity, you want to feel the hamstrings, glutes, muscles around the shoulder blade, and the mid-back area working. So there we go. So perfect, Alex. So there you go. That ends up being the back pain workout at home. Give those exercises a go and let me know how it ends up affecting your back pain. Now, if you want some of my other best tips and tricks when it relates to back pain, I recommend you click right here. I have a brand new free report called 5 Tricks That Fight Back Pain and Tightness. Click right here. Let me know where to send you that brand new free report, and I'll send you that brand new free report right away. Now, if you're watching this on a mobile device, tablet, or smartphone, head down below in the description and click the first link, which will end up being exercisesforinjuries.com/backs. Let me know where to send you that report, and I'll send you that report right away. Now, if you got benefit from this video, make sure you like this video. If you have a question or comment for me, leave it down below in the comment section. And then lastly, hit subscribe in order to get future back pain relieving videos.